right here on KTN. 6th of January, the first Monday of the year. We're glad you're watching. Always a delight to be part of your morning. Remember, today we're asking you to share with us your New Year resolutions. That's if you have any. And quite a number of you already tweeting, texting in. An interesting one here from Lord Chancellor. You're saying, mine is to get that driving license. Please go ahead and get it. Let me just get to my Twitter handle. And there's somebody here saying, mine is to ensure that I'm a better man. That is Tameka. We have Miroko talking about, I hope to get a wife this year. And goes on to propose. Okay. Phil talks about to ignore politicians. They are causing us untold misery. Well, I don't know if you can ignore them, Phil, but hey, you could always try. My biggest resolution, Shakur Sheikha says, is to try to get the golden boot in Qatar Soccer League apart from red cards. Oh well, all the best with that. And many more of your resolutions coming in. Keep them coming. It is time for The Way. It is the show and the segment where we put into perspective, analyze the stories that have been dominating news headlines in the past 2 weeks, especially after the holiday season. We are back with a bang with Ndolo and Gachoka. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning and Happy New Year, Sophia.
Happy New Year.
I hope you had a chilly, well, it was a chilly morning, but I hope your holidays were very nice.
They were very nice.
Merry,
I enjoyed.
Blessed and so on.
Merry, blessed with family, with friends. I was around and out and about. Where were you?
I did Mombasa.
You did Mombasa.
Pingo Ridge with the big boys. Bob's was very nice. But let me tell you, Mombasa traffic was worse than Nairobi on a Friday because everybody transferred. So Shafi Weru, a known radio guy, proposed that December's, why don't we do an exchange program? And when Nairobians go down, let Mombasans come up.
I noticed none of you said you went to church, which is disappointing.
I went to church.
We don't want to tell lies. I didn't.
I went to church.
Yes, to give Thanksgiving as well.
Yes.
But the year has begun, the 51st year, or since independence for Kenya. A lot to hope for in this year. 8 months of the new government. As we now move into the 51st year since independence. A lot to look at.
As we're asking our viewers about the resolutions, very quickly, do you have any?
Well, I think my resolution, yes, I think for me it's a resolution for a freedom that respects the constitutional order, particularly this attack on the media. The digital migration, the rights of journalists, the kind of Bill of Rights that Kenyans fought so hard for. I kind of feel sometimes, whether you're the NGO, whether it's a Judicial Service Commission, whether it's a media, I feel that somehow there is big government and a bigger hand of government, you know, kind of bringing back the democratic gains. So my prayer, more than a resolution, is that the gains that we have achieved over those last 50 years are actually not reversed, and we actually can secure them, not for ourselves, but for succeeding generations. I think it is critical and important for people to understand nobody in the media is fighting migration. We are only talking about how do you handle signal, how do you handle content. And we need to have a dialogue with government rather than confrontation with government. And I think that's what
that's your prayer.
Yeah, my prayer.
Resolution, personal one with us.
I don't do resolutions. However, I resolve to continue to champion the rights of the downtrodden, the entrenchment of constitutionalism in Kenya, a better Kenya, a freer, democratic, stable, country. And obviously you will see some of us challenge such things as the railway tender, 400 million shillings per kilometer. Can we afford that? I just resolved to continue to bring those issues to the fore, to take positions, to espouse those positions, to articulate those issues really for the greater good. So that's, I just want to have the spirit and the energy to do so, and to thank the platforms, the likes of KTN, for allowing us to do this, and to do it well. I think it's for the greater good. Otherwise, I have no resolutions.
But right from the beginning, I think, Sophia, it's always important to talk something positive about the country.
We will get to that, Tony. We will get to that.
And I was just wanted to add to say, it was really good to see a depoliticized period during Christmas. I think there was more of Kenyans coming together than fighting at each other. And I noticed that during that period.
It's a time of family and fun and merry making.
Yes.
Let's get to it, gentlemen. gentlemen, because
which is not easy when you can't afford food. But
it is not easy. We will talk about that as well, Benji. So the year has begun, and quite a number of the stories we were discussing right here on the show last year spill over to 2014, developing stories, things we'll continue to watch. But one that has recently just caused, a lot of, you've seen a lot of controversy, a lot of different opinions around the same, and I want us to start with is the appointments. So there are voices in support, those coming out and saying, at the end of the day, we had the former President Moi saying, you know what? It's not about a leader from your area being selected. Whoever is appointed should serve all. Then we've had those talking about age and talking about people being recycled. They, lost in the elections, or they're too old to serve. What are your thoughts? And putting this into perspective, also keeping in mind what we've heard, that these are just but a quarter of the appointments that are going to be done, so there are more to come, and that perhaps Kenyans should wait for the whole batch before they can start criticizing or looking at it deeper. Tony, I'll begin with you.
I think my friend Uhuru Kenyatta is walking a tightrope, because first of all, he presented himself as a candidate, a digital candidate, a candidate of change and transformation to the young people. And the Jubilee ticket was a ticket that gave so much hope and promise, anticipation to many jobless, and may I also add, very capable young Kenyans. So when you bring up the debate as to why you bring in Matu Wamai, who is not only analog, but before analog, I mean, a man who is capable and was capable at his time, but his son is a friend of mine and a capable CEO of a publicly quoted company. They are people of half his age, of equal ability. Mudhaura was 40 at some point, and he began his career because he was given a chance to begin. I think it is wrong for the president to have promised young people the opportunity to give them an opportunity to excel, and then deny them that opportunity on the basis that they have no experience. When will they ever have the experience if they never began? If Sophia Wanuna was not at KTN, would she ever be able to take over from Catherine Kasavuli? Is she not as capable as Catherine Kasavuli? Not to say Kasavuli is not as good. And these questions of always being told, look at the rear view mirror, were part of the election competition between Jubilee and CORD. And I'm not surprised that Prime Minister Raila Odinga jumped on this and said, hey, I support Mudhaura, because his own presidential bid is going to be based on the fact that you don't argue about age. I can run at 75, 78. So they are playing, in my view, into the hands of the former Prime Minister.
So are you saying the biggest problem you have with these appointments is the age factor, and are all those appointed as you...
Well, I believe in a meritocracy, as you will agree, are the best people to do the best jobs. But that, beyond what I believe, there was a promise, a covenant, a social contract between the governed and the election which was run. And Jubilee promised the younger people, who obviously historically are not given advantage, that this time they would have an equal advantage. In fact, Sophia, if you remember, there is a specific procurement rule that is supposed to allow government procurement to go to young people. So what has happened to that rule when it comes to the issue of appointments? The president has gone back to the politics of patronage, meaning you elect people who are cronies, not because they're the best in what they do, which is going to bring a problem to meritocracy. He has gone back to appointing people who have been there for 50 years. Matu Wamai is 80 plus.
The issue seems to be with that one person.
Well, it's just one example. It's not one person. I'll go further and say Ambassador Mudhaura is a good friend of mine, and actually has served Kenya very well. But he has served Kenya for 30 years. There must be other people who can serve Kenya.
Let's hear from Benji, because Benji, at the end of the day, I will play the devil's advocate here and put on the other side of the coin. The argument has been made that at the end of the day, these people are qualified in their own right. So if you're going to look at this, as we had the Deputy President talking about, just from the lenses of tribalism or the lenses of age, then we're going to miss the point altogether. What are your thoughts?
Tony makes a very good point. And to me, first of all, just hearing the former Prime Minister say that no living human being is better than Mudhaura, for me was very curious, knowing what I know, which again, Tony as a former chief of protocol can tell you for sure, that the problems between the Prime Minister's office when it was domiciled in Treasury and the office of Ambassador Mudhaura were very serious problems, very difficult problems. You remember the former PM not collecting his salary for over a year because of problems with the scaling and the whatnot and the hierarchy and the protocol, issues between him and the former vice president. And so Tony has just explained very well that, because for me it was very curious, just knowing the antagonism. He's playing a very, very, very strategic game plan that seeks to remove off the table the debate about age and whatnot, because he's very effective on the campaign trail. So he will easily rope you in and then go on the campaign trail and say, look, wakati nili support Mudhaura hakuwa mzee. You understand? So, and it's smart politics, but I've got to say that the risk, the pitfall that Jubilee and especially Uhuru Kenyatta risks falling into is one of the most fundamental sins in marketing, which is to overpromise and underdeliver. So Jubilee really ran on this almost inspirational campaign platform of the youth. The youth, we understand the youth, we're young, we're different from Kibaki, who is an octogenarian, and his partner, mate, Raila, who are all, analog guys, etc. We're the guys that will stand with you, we understand you, we're hip, we're swag, etc. He will easily now fall into the trap of seeming, and I've heard this even from Jubilee guys, to have in essence conned young people to get their votes, but then to turn around and reward very close cronies who have questionable capabilities and who are just loyal, all right, some of whom have been on this show. Secondly, that he is also just rewarding cronies, some of whom are the exact octogenarians, while Kenyan youth have not had a chance, as Tony says, to even start the race.
What about the question of the other appointments?
It will really demotivate his base.
Because this is not all we've had. There are more appointments, Sophia, double the number that has already been done.
Yeah, but you see, this is the first move.
It's an indicative of what we are likely
it's the same thing. What do we say? First impressions. It's a first impressions thing, so this is the first move they've made. That's a message they've sent. It also gives potent ammunition to political enemies to turn around and brand you a conman. And as Ahmed Nasiri made the point yesterday, this year will be a decisive year. If Uhuru doesn't get his act together this year, as far as the big things, as far as youth employment, as far as delivery of the major Jubilee manifestos, and as far as the fight against corruption, if he's able to be branded, for example, through the railway tender, as a corrupt president, it'll be even worse, because he'll be seen as one who's so sly that he can say he abhors corruption, but he's allowing it to happen in the background. So double speak. This is the year that is going to be definitive for Uhuru
the president.
Yes, for the presidency.
I must also add, I don't know whether there's anyone in State House giving him some basic reading. Because if you read the Prince Machiavelli, you really don't have to be Einstein. When you are forming government, you don't reward your friends. When you're forming government, you reward competencies and people you can easily fire.
But are you saying these people are completely incompetent?
I am saying and underscoring, there is not only incompetent, they have sycophancy.
Okay.
And this is one of the reasons they have messed up the ICC, which we'll come to, which has only resolved itself because some of us stood our ground. But the issue that worries me the most is the president doing some basic reading. When Obama came into office, he admitted that he had read several books, among them the history of Abraham Lincoln and various presidents who had come before him, in order to take on the challenges of leadership. Machiavelli's principle is very simple. A chief executive ought to be able to fire easily the people under him, in order for him to be able to run the country professionally without the baggage of emotion. Now, what the president has done, not only has he brought in the analog generation in this first appointment sphere, even if he has many more appointments to make, but he's going to make all of them based on emotional appointments. That Sakaja is a member of parliament, that the vice chair of TNA now works in the office of the president. If you're going to bring all your friends on board, then you're going to have a family party You're going to have not governance as it should be, a professional setup. And I think that for me, that is a problem that the Uhuru will face. And he better look back in the rear view mirror and see how Kibaki was destroyed by his friends. When Kibaki's first year, when he was unaware, there were, yes, young people, but they were his friends. Murungaro, Dr. Christopher Murungaro, Alfred Gitonga, people like Muraito Murongi, and so on. But after a while, Kibaki found he couldn't govern with them. So they all had to go, including Matere Kireri, who was seen to be really the bosom friend of the president, including, at the end, Mother Karua, who had always been in DP. So at the end, when Kibaki got actually governing, he was working with his rival in 1992, who was Uhuru Kenyatta, and other people who were brand new. And part of the TNE miracle has been that Uhuru left Kanu, decamped from Kanu, and left a big emotional baggage, his father's party, and then began a brand new party, began by new people, unknown, and so forth. So this dream and hope he created in the country must be reflected in his style of governance. And it's not enough to remove your jacket in a white shirt with William Ruto and say that we are beginning a new cabinet, but then you don't walk the talk.
Walk the talk.
And that is looking very bad for my good friend, the president. But it is not beyond redemption. He must sit on the chair. And he has not done it on Westgate. He promised us an inquiry as to what happened in Westgate. The army rejected it, and he has not been able to instruct the army that Kenyans want answers about Westgate. So he can reverse what he has done and still this year begin it with a proper stepping. With a proper stepping.
And gentlemen, this is indeed one of those stories we will watch very keenly to see how it develops. But you mentioned something, Benji, you touched on the railway tender, and it was interesting to see Wetangula, one of the Bungoma senator and one of the code principals, because we've had a lot of quiet in as far as that is concerned. We've had voices of discontent from Jubilee on that, Keter making headlines, and even when the president visited Rift Valley a while back, a lot of the addresses and speeches that were made were directed to him, and that he's been financed, the allegations we heard. But in as far as this railway tender process is concerned and everything that we're hearing, what is likely to be the conclusion of this matter?
It's important to look at the Nairobi Law Monthly of December 2013, which is last month, which is basically last week, really. The Nairobi Law Monthly is an investigative legal journal that is not just on legal matters, it's on policy and governance matters. And it's something I'd encourage Kenyans to read because it's not highly technical. It is exploratory. It goes into great detail about the issues with this railway tender. Suffice to say that corruption is alive and well in Kenya. In my own opinion, but which can be very well validated and verified, we are a country that is still poor because a select few must live in absolute luxury and basically at the expense of the many. So money is being stolen is what it looks like. As far as Senator Wetangula, he himself has very serious questions to answer. The English saying is, when you're in a glass house, you cannot throw stones. The Tokyo Embassy scandal was another fantastic example of, again, the theft of resources. From the information I have, I understand that there's even CCTV footage of the Tokyo Embassy scandal where money was being removed in actual cash to avoid leaving a paper trail. All this points to a very disturbing culture in this country where it is about pursuit of political power at any cost, looting of resources to finance campaigns. It is something that has especially intensified since the return of multi-partyism, and beginning with the so-called Golden Bag in 1992-93. And so I must say that Alfred Keter, the young guy, has really come out strongly as a brave, independent-minded, maverick. It is very possible, Sophia, and I think we touched on that either on this show or on another show, that you can plan and strategize and think that you will say some things in front of the president, and then you get there and you just freeze. But the level of confidence, the level of eloquence that Alfred Keter, and consistency that Alfred Keter has had on this issue and on the underlying issues politically, I think that he is being an honest communicator on the same. I think his boss, the deputy president, is being a little, you know, a little...
So you feel independent, honest, because he has been accused that somebody's bankrolling him to make all this noise and create this...
I think he's a mouthpiece.
I would like to...
I think he's a mouthpiece for somebody.
I think he's a mouthpiece.
But he's being honest on, you know, a lot of the issues. But what is more disturbing is if this tender began at about 200 and something billion, and now we are
trillions,
about 8 times greater than that. One of the other things that it obviously displays, Sophia, is that that Kenyans are also willing to lay down and allow a small cabal of leaders to loot the country dry. That is also very disturbing.
Something important that I would like to bring. I don't agree fully with Ndolo on this issue. First of all, let's bail the cat about Kitero. Obviously, being aware of the laws of libel, as a seasoned journalist, I would have told you who are bankrolling him. The president even alluded to it directly. They're very big wigs who are behind Kitero. He lands by chopper now when he goes home. He's a young man earning a salary of 500,000, and I don't know whether that's what it costs for an hour on a chopper. I mean, really, let's call let's call Tom and Benji. Sophia, we have a very serious problem in the country because it's the guy who is shooting should listen to my grandmother. 3 fingers are pointing back, and God is a witness. I personally believe that the railway tender was a deal gone bad. Some people invested heavily in Jubilee, and in this particular case, URP. And they expected immediate feedback, both in the job market, and that's why William Ruto is having so many problems with people who are demanding state corporations, because in Rift Valley, the word is, it's our time to eat. Now, there are those business tycoons who made the URP dream come true and believe the deputy president would never have been a 50-50 partner without them. And they're asking now, we put in our investment and we want this return. And so the president and the deputy had to fly to Rift Valley and speak publicly, trying to bring down the discontent, not of politicians, but of their sponsors, because those sponsors have lost lucrative government contracts, and the president said so. Now, the issue of turning east began with the retired President Mwai Kibaki. In fact, the genesis of the railway line and many of the projects that are now being implemented by the new Jubilee government had already been in the making. Whether it is a Lamu corridor, whether it is rail, etc., they were already in the making, and they were already advanced discussions with China. I think what happened was a decision was made based on what was going on with the ICC and Kenya's isolation by the West, that whatever it is, we need to go east in order for Kenya to continue to progress, but send a signal to the West that we don't need your donor money, we don't need you whatever. It's more expensive to go this way, but I think the political decision was made. Coming back to the issue of whether the corruption exists or not, I think nobody can convince me that Uhuru Kenyatta is corrupt at all. He has had a checkered political career. Never ever has he ever been mentioned in any place, at anywhere, that with being involved in misappropriation of public funds. I think it's very unfair for Ruben Ndolo to say that Uhuru Kenyatta's regime will be by Benji Ndolo to say that Uhuru's administration will be seen to be one of corruption. I think that if there is anybody who has been involved in corruption, they will come to actually be prosecuted by Uhuru, because Uhuru, even when he was Minister for Local Government, had one of his personal assistants arrested and charged over corruption. So I don't think that it is corruption from the top. If there is mathematical, engineering, or other challenges that have brought this matter to the public limb, I hope it is not Parliament, but the judiciary that will deal with it, because this Parliament is rogue. And I have no belief that you can have any inquiry in Kenya's National Assembly that will unravel. All those committee members will also get into the same game of which MP is which side and who is oiling the machinery.
But you know, as we bring that particular conversation to a close, it's interesting that many a times we'll have these discussions, we'll have all these sentiments and speeches and proclamations being made in public, but in as far as bringing into play and enrolling the support and help of the bodies that are meant to help fight such kind of allegations, corruption, we rarely see that happen. We've had some of the politicians say, okay, if you have evidence of this having happened, why not, seek a recourse in as far as getting the EACC involved, reporting that that's why it can be investigated. So do you also sense, in as far as the fight against corruption, because that is deep-rooted, it's a struggle a thorn in the flesh of Kenya as a country that has to deal with now. So in as far as these organizations and the institutions set up to fight this vice, do we see any kind of freshness, any kind of optimism that they would ever resolve?
No, we don't. These institutions are characteristically weak. If you look at, for example, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, who's heading that commission now? Mumo Matemu. How many Kenyans know Mumo Matemu? How many Kenyans know what he stands for? Give me one single thing that Matemu has said about the fight against corruption, or even how he personally feels about corruption, what have you. He's actually in office on appeal. He had been ruled by the court to be unfit for office because he himself had been accused of very serious corruption, you know, at his previous place with some business, you know, company, I don't want to say the name, that, you know, was getting extorted, or that they were extorting and what have you. I think he came from the Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA. All right, so this is the kind of person heading a body like that, a body that we have called for, some of us, to have prosecutorial powers, that has, you know, arresting officers, that has investigative powers and what have you, but only that recommends, you know, action almost in a vacuum. So we're not really fighting the war on graft. The war on graft is a war that needs absolute and total commitment. It is where President Uhuru has done quite well to personally, as Tony has just alluded to, express his disgust, his opposition to the culture of stealing public money and what have you. So again, until you have very strong individuals, real committed believers, you know, I dare say, if we had very fair and strong institutions in this country, some of us that sit and fight these things in the NGO world and elsewhere would be quickly called upon to walk the talk. You see, when PLO Lumumba was there, I met him severally. And I said, PLO, you cannot fight corruption through talking, through talking about high voltage files, through issuing ultimatums and warnings. All that is hot air. Corruption is fought through action. To send a very clear signal to a cabinet member, to a member of parliament, that you cannot come into this office having a net worth of this. In a year, your net worth is 24 times that.
What it was,
you're chopping all over the place. You're taking bribes and what have you. This is how you start to contain corruption. Because if we don't, I think that in the next 10 years, especially if not checked by this administration, we are at the risk of losing the country, so to speak.
And it's Mwananchi who ends up on top of us.
I'm actually impressed, Sophia, that you said Mwananchi. I was going to agree with you by saying, you know, sovereignty and supremacy rests with the people. And one of the things that people don't understand when they see the media fighting the draconian media bill, and when we are fighting to argue that these institutions are weak, is because if you don't inform the public cannot have an outcry and begin to demand accountability. And one of the things that happens in the police states or draconian tyrannical states is the dismantling of the media, so that people do not know some of the matters we are now discussing. So I'm saying that the thing that will hurt the government the most, and my good friend the president, is not that he's personally corrupt, but to be seen to be fighting the institutions that are bringing out and earthing the issue. You don't shoot the messenger. So the issue here, and I would like it to go concurrently, is that on yonder here sits the fourth estate. It is the duty of investigative journalists to make sure that we hold these institutions to account, so that the people understand their government and the people can be able to regulate their government and the actions of that government in order that they can change it if they so feel that that government has failed. I wanted to just say one thing we forgot when we were talking about the issue of age and so forth. Why did we put a 2-term limitation on the presidency? Why can President Uhuru Kenyatta not be elected for more than 2 terms? It is because the people in their sovereign wisdom, so that nobody should have excessive power because it corrupts absolutely. So they put a 2-term limitation. That same sovereign philosophy from the people should apply to Modaura, Matuamai, GB Kilimo, and all the other people who are coming back. And even in corruption, we should have that same issue. People should not stay on the job indefinitely. And that's one of the problems you're having by refusing the transition within the army. You need to have new people coming, new blood, so you don't institutionalize corruption through the same network. Because one part of removing it is bringing new people on the block. And those people who come in are new broom sweeps clean. And therefore, I'm worried that this recycling that is going on in government from the intelligence services, you know, you have the same people at the intelligence services, the same people everywhere. These people all know each other. So are they going to, are they going to burst each other? Personally, I feel part of the resistance to having somebody like Tony Gachoka or Benji Ndolo at the center of government say, how this man is crazy. This man is going to talk about all these matters because they would rather have trusted hands like Modaura that keep quiet, hands like Modaura that have seen so much but did not do much. When you talk about Modaura having achieved a lot, I also want to say corruption thrived like agro-leasing under his watch, and so on and so on. So I think it's wrong just to present a CV of one person on one side and not present the other. The president has to bring people of competence and people who can bring new vision and new energy to the fight against corruption, but to governance.
Dick Cheney, who was a vice president of our most disastrous regime under George W. Bush, always talked about what Tony's talking about now, circling the wagons. You know, misinforming the public, doing all these crazy things, and then protecting each other all around, so that now you segregate. It's a very, very unpopular way, by the way, of ruling. Where you segregate the cabinet and the government from the people that popularly elected it. It's a pitfall that one must not fall into. He's very right that you need, you know, a fresh water. One of the presidents, I think Abraham Lincoln, called a clash. You know, it was actually General Powell that talked about a clash of ideas, where you don't have groupthink, where Tony comes with his different style and idea, and then somebody else that's safe, and then you try to actually find a good middle ground along which you can pass. Otherwise, you're right, it's a gang of people that know each other, that have spent time together in the, you know, central government, from the different corridors, from treasury to OP and what have you. And so it is almost like a conspiracy, you know, an unspoken conspiracy of let's eat, it's our time to eat, we don't know how long we're here, let us eat as much as we can. And in the meantime, again, it is the Mwananchi who suffers when the economy is not creating jobs, when the shilling has no value, when you are just unable to, you know, access consumer goods. I don't know how many of you guys saw the article by David Ndee on Saturday on a sister publication, and it was just interesting the kind of missteps that even Kibaki did that led to a Kenya where we have fantastic highways coming up every day, but a lot of Kenyans unable to buy a loaf of bread or a pint of milk.
Let's just go to one of those very important topics again that has been making news headlines, the issue of digital migration, one that's inevitable. 2015, everybody needs to have moved that direction, but a lot of issues around this, and the biggest concern is that ordinary Mwananchi has very little, most little understanding of what really is the issue here, because there are all manner of voices coming out on this particular issue. But the biggest question has been, in terms of preparing everybody to move, who failed in that?
Allow me to go first on this one. This one's a very sensitive one. So I want to make 2 points very clear. First of all, Sophia, I have got to fault the media houses a little bit for trying to procrastinate on everything. We cannot postpone everything all the time. So we initially tried digital migration. We started talking about it in 2011, 2010. Then we said 10 to 12. It was pushed another 6 months, and on and on.
When you say the media is procrastinating on it, how?
Basically, the position that the media houses were taking is, we're not ready now. Let's push it. Let's kick the ball down. Is it that we're not ready, or that measures to ensure everybody is ready have not been put? But that's exactly what I'm explaining. I'm just giving that argument on the outset to say that I'm not even saying the media is wrong. I'm just saying that we have got, as a country, to take to adopt the attitude of sense of urgency and sense of purpose, to avoid talking about things endlessly. We do migration, we complete that, we move on. Which brings me to my second point. The real issue with this migration topic is several things. Number one, who is the facilitator, this Chinese company? What powers do they have? Because we don't want a situation where the Chinese company is holding the gateway that the media houses have to go through, and therefore censorship becomes a possibility. You understand?
Yeah.
So that's a real genuine concern. Who are these people? How did they win the tender and what have you? But secondly, the cost of it being so prohibitive to the average Kenyan, my proposal would be that the government, in all its wisdom and with all the money they've been looting, because I'm not going to, you know, pull my punches here, it's for the government to see how to facilitate for the average Mwananchi. Because how is a member of the public in Webuye who is jobless or in Marsabit going to be able to buy a set-top box for about 3,000 shillings? You tell me. People are living on $1.
I want to first of all start by respecting the Court of Appeal, and by saying that I'm very happy that the Court of Appeal is already seized of this matter, and they disagreed with some of the sentiments being expressed or espoused by Ndolo. We need to limit ourselves to the prayers before the court, simply because this station and this group is a party to the case, and that's my legal advice.
Yeah.
But I would say this, that before the court was these arguments that Benji Ndolo was alluding to. They were deliberated at the High Court, and the judge in his wisdom found that the media houses had not done what they were supposed to do. The media houses were not happy with the judgment, and as laid out by law, appealed. And they put before the Court of Appeal grounds of appeal, prayers and so forth. In their wisdom, the judges of appeal found that there is a case to be appealed, and so ordered that until the appeal is heard and determined, migration should stop. The court or the learned judges could not have made such an order if there were no issues or matters that were before the court.
Yeah.
In order that we are fair to the court and to you, Sophia, for asking the right question, I can tell you in this format that the prayers before the court are about who will control the signal, who will control the content, how will that affect the public interest as weighed against commercial interest, is migration an option or not an option, should it be done now or can it be done in phases? So the prayers that are before the court as made by the plaintiffs are on one side that, then the respondents on the other side are saying no, this must be immediate, the period in time has come, etc. So the court is actually going to be making three key issues. One of them is the timing, whether it should be immediate or whether it should be faced or not.
Yeah.
They will be also making a determination as to who will be licensed or not licensed. Because among the prayers of the petitioners is that each media house be licensed with their own digital license for transmission, so they can control content and distribution. So the determination as to whether one person will control that, a third party, or whether individual media houses will, that will be one important prayer.
Right.
The other important prayer, an important one as well, is whether or not the public will be helped or not helped in acquiring these so-called boxes, i.e. will the consumer be helped in any way, either through a delayed process or by being assisted, as other countries have had, in obtaining the so-called digital box. And the third issue, and I think the last issue, is whether or not the analog system can run parallel with the digital as this migration is taking place, as opposed to now to be taking place concurrently.
Yeah.
And I think those are the issues before the court. If you ask me to comment about that, I will only say what I said on Sunday, that the arc of history is long, but it always bends towards justice. And I hope that the judges, with these weighty matters before them, will remember that this is one of the most important petitions before them. Maybe after the presidential petition, I don't remember one that has a great public impact because of millions of Kenyans, and that maybe they will make the best decision for all of us.
Yeah, but also just in terms of facilitating and ensuring that people are informed why this is happening, what is happening, what they need to do in preparation for it. CCK, in terms of just playing that role to give out that information, to ensure everybody is ready and positioned fundamentally that we are shifting, we are changing.
They've not done it.
They've not done it because
they've not done it.
At the end of the day, people need to know that not one day things are being switched off, we are changing.
But Sophia, can I make a point? There's been a very huge debate, and I think a very valid debate on the role of the media during the campaigns and even post-campaigns during Westgate and whatnot. I think I must say, and this is what I personally try to do myself, the work of media as a watchdog, as a fourth estate, is not so much to cuddle up to power. It is to hold power to account. It is to always doubt, to always probe, to always ask questions, to always raise issues. And so generally, even when this, by the way, the controversial media bill that just passed that is now law. Yes. When that happened, and then add on top of that this whole digitization, which gives a window through which actual censorship could happen. A lot of Kenyans are asking, especially on social media, which is alternative media, the media must be a bit shocked because basically they had cuddled up to friends, and now a 20 million fine is actually law. So my advice is, I think media should do more of educating and enlightening, probing and asking questions, not just when there's an issue, but throughout. So that even now on the issue of this digital signal and how it works and whatnot, we haven't had a good, a good debate, again in the media, on TV, on radio, on what exactly this is and why that Monenchi can really understand. What we've had was just, I think I was traveling quite a bit and I came back and I put my TV on one day and then it had that black screen and message, and the other, local stations had that as well, with the exception of KBC. And so to me it was a bit dramatic. Again, I'm just cautioning that our work is to probe and to ask.
I think I want to add something.
Continue doing advocacy.
There is an arguable matter, again I say, in court, as to the commercial interest. In other words, the petitioners in this appeal control through public choice a large part of the viewership. The KTN Media Group, the Nation Media Group and Citizen control way beyond 60% of the viewership of the country. And it's argued in the appeal that because they have invested so much in people, in equipment, in training and so forth, that they enjoy this not by accident. They enjoy it because they have invested in it. On the other hand, there are new media upstarts who come in and have made no investment and wish to have an advantage over those commercial interests. So there is going to be, as this appeal is determined, the question as to whether or not the people who are thousands who are employed by these media houses have also got a right to stay employed, earn a good living within the context of a good investment and a professional investment. So here you've got the issue, and in terms of education, the education that is being put out by some media houses is misinformation, because they are trying to fight for space which they don't occupy, not because they don't have the merit or they don't have the audiences, and therefore they are not joining in with everybody else. So I think part of the determination here shall be what is fair competition. I understand the petition to say that the petitioners all welcome competition. All they wish to have is to be allowed to control their content through having an independent license to be able to communicate. And that's the prayer before the Superior Court and before the honorable judges. And I want to just leave it there because it's an ongoing leave it there because we cannot, of course, discuss the merits of the case, but we'll be watching very closely to see how that does unfold in coming days. But gentlemen, also very important to talk about this morning is road safety, because last year those numbers were very high, people dying on Kenyan roads. We've already seen those numbers again already rising this year. And night travel ban is one of the things that has been discussed on whether is it working, is it what Kenya needs now. But the biggest criticism on the stakeholders, those involved, those set to put out these rules and measures to mitigate on the same, is that we're seeing a lot, and we keep seeing a lot of knee-jerk reactions. Not quite something that's wholesome. I was listening to the NTSA chair, and was talking about this holistic approach, but we never quite see it. We see one thing being done, so now night travel banned, then what will be next? So at the end of the day, it looks like a problem that we'll continue to see for a very long time, as many Kenyans continue to die on the roads.
I'll tell you this, Sophia, and allow me to go first on this. When I first moved back home, From the US.
Yes,
one of the first things I noticed, and I really must talk about this, because as much as we are trying to forge ahead, we are still lagging behind. It is very, very dark in Kenya at night. It is very, very dark. We are still a long ways from where we need to be. You know, when you talk about infrastructure, when you talk about the level of you know, construction of a road, for example, that qualifies to be a good road, where you look at the factors that are causing all these accidents, like potholes and what have you. I actually drove to Mombasa the last week of December. I've got to tell you, the road linking the port of Mombasa and the county, which runs over 60% of Kenya's GDP, that road has got to be a dual carriageway. This road is a bypass road, you know, where cars bypass each other, one lane highway. Yes, it cost quite a bit of money. Yes, it was in terrible condition when President Kibaki came into power. This road is carrying trucks that pull containers. This road is carrying passenger buses. This road is carrying passengers vehicles that are doing 120 kilometers per hour and more. This road is carrying Land Cruiser, tourist vans that are carrying tourists from Belgium and England and where have you, and Rome, all over the world. This is a matter of urgency. And so to my friend Engineer Michael Kamau, I am surprised that, and we're not even talking about 4 lanes each side, something like what Thika Road is. 2-lane highway going down, 2-lane highway coming up from Mombasa. I've not had any discussions on this. I've had a few murmurs on this. This is really, really super urgent. But again, back to driving at night. A lot of these vehicles are driven in pitch darkness, filled to capacity. We still have the problem of unroadworthy vehicles in this country. So that many times a car will just break down somewhere in Subukia, no reflectors, no nothing, and people are flying into that car and dying. I just saw the same thing and tweeted about it on Mombasa Road a few weeks ago. We have got to really set these measures to save more lives. Actually, 2013 was one of the worst. 3,000 lives on the road is 3,000 too many, and that's not even talking about those now who have lost limbs, eyes, legs,
and as you talk about that, Betty,
arms, whatever.
Also to remember the pedestrians as well. As much as we're talking about the speeding, the bad roads and all,
allow me to go into that as well.
Pedestrians, because half the number of those people who died last year
do
were
we
pedestrians.
have, for example, on Wayaki Way, why do we have a woman and child and a kiondo going to the wall, putting the child over, jumping and then running? I just came from the country of Cyprus a few weeks ago. It says clearly no pedestrian traffic.
But we do that. There's all those still around. We've been advised Sophia, many times to use the
no, we need to do the right laws and enforcement. Enforcement. You have to go to the high.
I'm very happy with the way you framed the question as to whether one law, one statement, one act, a dual carriage road here or there will solve the problem. Actually, when Kenya has had terrible problems like this before, I'm reminded of the late Michuki, who came up with the famous Michuki rules. And actually made a significant difference in the transport sector because he led from the front. He was taking no nonsense from the matatu industry. In fact, they even went on strike. People and the public supported him. People walked to work for nearly 2 weeks until the matatu sector, the public sector, was brought into some order. We had the Mungiki menace in this country. And there was a policy decision that Mungiki are no longer going to run our cities and our towns and are not going to terrorize people. And a policy was implemented to the letter by the government. Now, what I'm saying is that this issue of road carnage is no different. You require a proper policy framework and somebody leading it from the top. The problem with this country, and I kept saying again, is that the president is rewarding his friends in power, not people who are capable of doing the job. Anywhere else in the world, with 3,000 people dead, and you are the Secretary for Transport, you ought not only be fired, you ought to be charged, you know, with criminal negligence. The problem with this country is that people want power and not the responsibility. We must have people who are accountable for the jobs that they take in the name of the people.
Yeah.
And part of the problem in governance in Kenya is not enough just to say sorry and say in your in your New Year statement as head of state, we regret so many people have died. Take action. Why have they died? Why is there another Michuki in this country? Can't we find another Michuki who's in charge and who can be able to take and lead?
I'm here.
This
Sophia.
We must say this thing as it is, because I know Benji is jumping into this, but I feel for the families of those people who have died and been named, be they pedestrians or passengers. But I also feel that these are the voters that put this government in power, and therefore we must demand of our government protection of life and liberty is among the key oaths of office that the president and his government take. And we must demand, if as Kamau is actually incompetent and completely unable, spending too much time on the railway and airport development and not on the preservation of the lives of Kenyans, it's not enough to give orders. Who has been jailed? Which bus company director has gone to jail for the loss of one life? It's just drama. Somebody's going to be arrested today, then tomorrow, then they walk away.
Then they go and change the company
musical
name.
chairs. I want to be very clear that this government is paying too much lip service and not doing any action. And they ought to learn from Michuki, who took action and boarded Matatus personally.
Because that's
and
leadership.
People were arrested when Michuki was there. It has
leadership.
been done. It can be done. It must be done.
It must be done.
Sophia, on the 2nd of January, unfortunately, I lost my uncle. It was very painful. Yeah, he was just unwell, diabetic, and he just went to sleep. Actually, as I carried him in my vehicle to the hospital, just minutes away, he just went to sleep. And so yesterday, during the funeral meeting, as we're looking at examples of programs, because we're trying to do the funeral program and what have you, I saw a program of a young lady just yesterday who died through a road accident traveling from Timau to Meru. She had just called her husband and said, we're going to be a bit late. And her driver, she was working for one of, some sort of state corporation in Apajero. Her driver tried to overtake, couldn't, then swerved into a stationary vehicle that was not well lit. And if you look at, the point I'm making is, if you look at the story of this lady, her children, who she was to her children, and even who she was to her house help, you start to understand that behind all these figures are real lives, real Kenyan mothers, real Kenyan fathers, newlyweds and whatnot. She was just about to celebrate her anniversary, and they had said with the husband they would wear their marriage clothes again and what have you. We would, I think, start to take the issue of road carnage very seriously. And I just want to interject earlier when Tony was speaking and remind the country that the terrorist attacks of 9/11 in New York actually caused the death of about 3,000 Americans. And you can see that was a disaster. Are we having a 9/11 in Kenya quietly every year? That's a good way to look at it. It is a crisis of no mean, feat, and it has to stop. In fact, I challenge President Kenyatta to set a goal this year if he wants to start really carrying favor and having deliverables with Kenyans. Seek to have that number for 202014. Just that. Seek to have that number in December to 1,500, and you will have really moved the country forward.
Benji, for purposes of time, I'm sorry to interject. I thought that, Sophia, part of the problem is the political leadership. And I thought you would bring that up, because some of the conflicts happening within Jubilee government and some of the problems happening in CORD are critical. Because what is happening is, when you don't have an effective opposition, because part of the reason Jubilee is getting away with a number of things which actually should be voiced by the opposition is not happening, because the opposition itself is in disarray.
Yes.
And you're having a situation where the government in power is also in disarray. You've got a deputy president fighting for his political survival in his home backyard.
And legal survival.
Because he is being challenged by his own people that governance is not effective and they are not feeling the government. So at a macro level, at a bigger level, because transport, corruption, all these matters are endemic, and they are part of a question as to whether the standards of governance that were promised in the Jubilee dream when we became jubilated, are they being actualized? And you have a real tug of war. I don't know if you are aware, Sophia, that on, is it 9th? When is 9th? The deputy president will be at The Hague. I don't know if you're aware. That the judges...
I think that's on Monday.
On Monday. The court, in its wisdom, had an application before them by Karim Khan, CQC that after the State Assembly parties passed Excuso and the video link, they applied for this video link that they never wanted, if you remember. And they applied for Excuso. But the court ruled that the application came late, and therefore the deputy president had to go. Why am I raising this issue? I'm raising it because if the government will remain dysfunctional because of either the ICC or politics within Jubilee, then how are we going to be able to have a common policy? And how will they actually concentrate on dealing with such matters as we are discussing?
Okay, our time is just about up, but very quickly, I remember just asking, because one of the very interesting things is that in an individual's lives, as would be with our country, most of the time, a lot of attention and focus will be on what is not working, where the system is breaking, where the problems are. We'll criticize, we'll question, which is important. That must happen. But at the end of the day, as a country, there's good things happening for Kenya. So at the end of the show, I'd want to hear from you. What are those good things that are still happening in Kenya that we can celebrate and that we can, still have them encourage us to go on. But very shortly, before we get to that, very quickly, 2014 is here with us. Quite a number of issues coming from 2013. We still have ICC, one of the big concerns for the Jubilee government. Kenya cannot run away from that conversation. We've talked about road safety, there's security, there's corruption, you name it, quite a number of issues. And at the end of the day, bottom line for everybody watching us this morning is about, can I put food on the table for my family? Is about my needs, my bills, can they get paid? Can I feed my children? Can they go to school? And all those other things. So that as the cost of living continues to escalate, those are the biggest concerns for Kenyans. So as we look forward, quickly, Benji, what do you see? What does the government, everybody, in terms of their roles, what needs to be put in place to ensure 2014 is better?
The focus, thanks, Sophia. The focus needs to be on the economy, not from a macro level, but from a consumer level.
Right.
Most Kenyans are finding it very difficult to travel to work, all right, if they find a job, to put food on the table, even if they have a job, because Kenyans are working too hard for too little, all right? People are not having what you call disposable income or even income to spend. Rents are still too high in this country. Transport, again, is practically impossible.
Very high, especially.
Food as well. And Uhuru, as a former finance minister, should understand this better than anybody. Our advice, I ran the oil price advocacy campaign for about a year and more, and interacted very well with Treasury and the Energy Regulatory Commission and the Ministry of Energy. What I've asked them to do is, and we're available to partner and work on this, the prices of petroleum in this country on taxation constitute about almost 50% of the price. And this, to me, is the fundamental problem from which everything else rises, because when kerosene and transport diesel and petroleum are that high, then the cost of distributing food, bringing it from the farm to the markets and whatnot, is obviously that high. If they can handle and manage the cost of fuel, it will quickly translate into reduced cost of production, and that will mean reduced cost of food. It is getting too expensive to eat in Kenya. That is inhuman, that is ridiculous, that is unacceptable with Kenya at 50 years old. That should be the focus of 2014, amongst other few things.
The focus 2014.
I think, first of all, the tax regime, the social regime, and the development regime must be looked at. In advanced democracies, when a rich man dies, 30% death duty is put on the estate. So the distribution of wealth comes from the rich to the poor. When you sell property on Mombasa Road, because the public have invested in it, you pay a capital gains tax, so that people who have got money benefiting from the infrastructure development also put that thing back. In Kenya, we have a regime that protects the rich, so the rich get richer and the poorer get poorer. And therefore, you're taxing the poor for consumable of food. But when you build View Park Towers, and it's today worth 2 billion shillings, but when you built it, it was 400 million, but the new highway and the lighting was done by Kenyan taxation. The owner benefits the profit without taxation. I think the tax regime has to be re-looked at. We must look at the social regime. Social democracy teaches that the rich take care of the poor, and the employed take care of the unemployed, okay, and the well take care of the sick. These tenets are important values, practiced in Scandinavia like Sweden and Denmark, and those countries' poverty levels are even better than the US, where most people have got such a smaller gap between the rich and the poor. Is this country going to become a country of Muthaiga versus Kibera, or is this country going to have a middle class where people actually are not in too far in terms of spectrum? My worry is that in successful governments since independence, we have idolized the rich and we have continued to sit on the poor. This bubble is going to burst. We cannot have a society where it fills a Range Rover at 10,000 bob, and that is the salary of a maid. And that is not possible because you cannot have such inequities in society, and they both buy the same supermarket,
Good job,
the same
Tony.
sugar.
Good
and
job,
I believe
Tony.
we must change social evolution. We must re-engineer Kenya, and we must have a proper, equitable society.
Tony is making the wrong assumption, though, that we're a social democracy country. All right. What I think we are is a conservative right wing to the core that says one thing and does another. I must commend him. Very good job, especially on the very live example of how much it costs to fill a Range Rover versus how much the salary of a waiter in Kenya is.
Benji.
Especially knowing that Tony's late father was a very wealthy man. That must be considered. You have to be a very wise and very deeply thoughtful person to even take a position like that, yourself not coming from a poor background. Because I must tell you that usually the rich or kids of the rich will be the first to protect these kinds of systems where the wealthy are propagated, and so for someone like this to be pro-poor,
simply because he named me, I want to tell him. His friend, Charity Ngilo, and I, actually, I was the head of her campaign in 1997. The Social Democratic Party, SDP, was founded on the principles with the late Apollo Jonjo and myself and Anyang Nyong on the basis of social equity and justice.
But they didn't take
so I've actually lived.
We've lived the walk. That's very good. I must congratulate you again.
Finally, the good. At the end of the day, after all has been said and done, really, what's working good? What is that?
Sophia, let me go first and say that now we're in the new year. It's the first week of January.
Right.
After all the difficulties and the tough election of 2013, Kenyans are still optimistic. Kenyans have woken up this morning, going to industrial area, going to town, going to the different counties, ready to till the land, going to the factories, going to teach our children, going to the hospitals. The Kenyan spirit is alive and well. It is a spirit of we must do more, we must do it, we must make it, we must move the country forward. Can I find 3 things? Honestly, I don't think so. But one of the best things is that Kenyans are still Kenyans, to the extent that they believe that 2014 will be better, to the extent that they want to aspire for a better country. How exactly they do that, it gets murky with the introduction of tribalism and whatnot. But I think that we are a people that are resilient, that are hopeful, that are optimistic, that are eager. It's also a good thing, I've seen the polls, that a lot of Kenyans feel that we are kind of moving in the wrong direction, and they've expressed those concerns. So that also is a good thing, because it means that we're willing to accept our mistakes and to alter course so that we can be a better country.
Thank you,
I can't find 3 things, but I found 2.
Tony,
3. The first one is our children. I love these results from the exams. The children of Kenya continue to learn, and education is the best fight against poverty and ignorance. I want to salute the teachers and the children who learn in very difficult circumstances and every year turn up for exams, and all their parents. Even one was a hawker in Kisumu who managed to get the top girl in Nyanza. I congratulate that dear lady. Kenya's position in Africa, we have come back to the Pan-African movement. I think we are stronger in Africa than Kenya has ever been. And of course, the last and the final one for me is my good friend, the president has defeated the ICC, and the prosecutor has dropped the charges, is about to drop the charges, and he will be vindicated. As I always said, he's been a man who has been free and wrongly placed at the ICC.
I sure hope you never have to eat your words.
I can assure you.
Because you'd rather eat your shoe.
Prophet, you said you'd be good.
Prophet, you said you'd be good. Prophet Tony. Happy New Year.
Well done, the president. You're free now.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being part of our discussion this morning. And quite a number of comments coming in. I'll just sample them very quickly. John Allen actually also watching. Good points on transport leadership, corruption. Some of the things you've been able to talk about this morning. We have Witsi talking about it is very important what the gentlemen are saying. These conversations, as we begin the year, important to put into perspective the challenges we face as a country. Let's see. Ndolo, we are a third world and more of mindsets need to be changed on how things are going to be done. That is John Keke. And of course, Tony Gachoka, somebody telling you, it's quite interesting to see Tony Gachoka criticizing his diehard friends in the government. Kunani, that's Pacific Aziz asking. Interesting. But also very many of you sending in your New Year resolutions. We're asking you, did you come up with any? Continue sharing them with us, and I will sample them as we go along with the show.
Sophia, John Allen. I derived my courage from the young man.
Yes.
John Allen Namu.
Okay.
Mine is just to wish you a beautiful 2014.
Thank you.
And I hope you continue rocking it at Morning Express.
Oh yes, rocking it. I love that. We will.
The way it
and
is.
As you see, we're setting up for bands. So in a short while, we'll be rocking it with the Amicus Gay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we'll be having an amazing
Well
time.
done,
Thank
Sophia.
you.
Right.
Thank you.
I wish you a lovely day.